Hi, welcome to video 11 of 12 that covers how to use the ProVAL Smoothness Assurance module to develop grind plans. So in this video we'll cover what's described in section 11 of our guide to using the ProVAL Smoothness Assurance module. We'll cover simulated grinds in ProVAL and just some general methods that are used in the field for layout. So we'll basically go over a summary of what head height means again. So a positive head height means the grinder head is being modeled above the zero head height plane, and this plane is a theoretical plane that exists that's calculated every inch along a profile. It's based on the average supporting elevations of the front and the back of the grinder. A negative head height means that grinder head is below that theoretical plane, and a zero head height means that grinder is right on that plane. So when we use ProVAL and we develop an initial grind list using the auto grind function, ProVAL always assumes a zero head height. So when we think about a grinder, it's operating on a fixed frame principle. That means there are no automatics to adjust this up or down based on what's going on in the field, like a paver or a cold planer. It's a fixed frame. This grinder head is just locked in. So in this example, here's an example of a road profile, as viewed from the side. Obviously it's a profile. So when we use the auto grind function, ProVAL goes and calculates it, drives that up, this cold planer, this diamond grinder along that road profile with the zero head height, and it calculates the elevations of that grinder head all along, and it determines where it's going to intercept, and it calls that the start location, and it keeps driving through. And it also calculates where that grinder daylights out of that cut. So it gives us all these locations, and the math essentially that it uses, it ends up being a feather in and a feather out of a grind. So if we take a grinder out to the field and we tell it to start prior to that location, that grinder operator is going to basically lower his grinder head down until it starts skimming that asphalt. In this case, we might have a grind plan where we had to take more material out of this bump. We might have taken this step where we say, okay, let's pull the grinder head back and then lower the grinder head to a negative head height. Then we'll revise those start and stop locations. We'll put a start location here and a stop location down here somewhere. Then we'll run that grind simulation, and when we do, the grinder is going to just drive ahead until that grinder intercepts that asphalt or the concrete surface. Then it's going to operate right on through until it daylights out. This actual daylight in and daylight out location may not match the locations that we physically entered into ProVAL. So we have to take that next step and evaluate the road profiles to determine where that station is. And to build as accurate of a model as possible, we need to take this extra step and revise that start location so that we are feathering in and feathering out. Oftentimes what will happen is it's very simple to estimate roughly where this location is, but when you run that model, often you'll find a step near the end, or it daylights way out past that point. So we need to look at these locations and refine them. The start location is extremely important because that's where that grinder is going to start. So if we don't do that, that grinder operator is going to take that first station that we guessed at, and he's going to lower his grinder head down. And the grinder operator, he doesn't have a gauge to evaluate his head height with respect to that zero head height plane. He's just going to pull up that station where we told him to, and he's going to lower his grinder head down until it starts skimming. Then he's going to start driving into it. Then we're going to get a line that's below both of these lines, and we're not going to be, that grind is not going to even be close to the grind that we tried to model in our software. So it's important to take all the steps that we can to try to build as accurate as a model as possible. So Okay, so now we'll talk about layout using GPS, DMIs, and a combination of both. So in most cases, when a grinder is out in the field, they'll have somebody laying out the locations of these start and stop locations by GPS. So every one of these inertial profile files have a GPS coordinates with embedded in them. So if you say you're going to be at station 1,000 feet, whatever, there's a coordinate for that. So if we say the grind starts at 1,000 and ends at 1,005, there's a coordinate for both those points. They can drive right up to those points and lay them out. Okay, if they don't have GPS, they can use a distance measuring instrument. This can be off quite a bit. This is a more accurate way to do it. So they can use it if they're going to use a DMI. Everyone should recognize that the distance measuring instrument that the inertial profile uses it's plus or minus 1 foot every 528 feet. So in a mile, you could be off 10 feet. 10 feet can make a big difference on a grind, in a 1 mile. So if you're going to start from a location, it's using a distance measuring instrument. You should have a good, solid, anchored location that has a coordinate and measure up from that point. So the other common way is a combination. The other common way of laying out these points in the field is using GPS with DMI. So this is what will often happen up in the mountains where there's a lot of tree cover, or any area where there's a lot of tree cover, where they can't get a real accurate GPS point because there's not enough satellites. So they'll have to back up to a spot where there's a clearing and they can get a lot of satellite readings, and then from that known GPS coordinate, we'll figure out the distance from that point up to the location they're trying to lay out using their distance measuring instrument. So the intent of this slide is just to give those who have not been in the field laying these grinds out an idea of what is happening, and this is not intended to be a method. This is essentially just talking to contractors and my understanding of their explanation to me how they're laying these locations out. So that's the end of this section 11, simulated grinds and executing grinds, and we'll move on to the next video.